Welcome to the exam prep session for MS-900, Microsoft 365 Fundamentals. My name is Joe Lurie. I'm a product manager in the Microsoft 365 product group. I am also a Microsoft certified trainer. You might have seen some of my other exam prep sessions, either recently or even over the last several years. I'm here today to talk about MS-900. You can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I be sure to respond to messages either way. For the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about just the Microsoft certification program, and just generally speaking, I'm not going to jump into MS-900 just yet. We're going to give you an intro to the certification program for those of you that may not have taken a Microsoft exam yet. So the Microsoft certifications they've recently gone through a change, and they're broken down into basically three categories. The fundamentals, and this is a fundamentals exam, just like there's a Dynamics 365 and an Azure fundamentals exam. There's the associate level exam, and that would be a modern desktop administrator, messaging administrator, a Teams administrator, something maybe an Azure administrator. And then after you take those, usually that's 2 exams. In the case of modern desktop administrator, that would be MD 100 and MD 101. You take the fundamentals, you take the MD 100 101 in this example, and then you can take the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Administrator exam. That Enterprise Administrator exam doesn't require MD 100, MD 101. It could be the Exchange or the messaging, or the Teams or the security. But you have to take one of the associate level, and then you can take the MS-100, MS-101, and become that enterprise administrator. It's not just taking exams. When you take the exams, they're also trying to test your confidence in understanding a scenario and giving the correct solution. So it's not just being able to take an exam, it's also understanding the technologies which are underlying. This exam itself, so the MS-900 exam is about 60 minutes. When you sit down to take the exam, you'll sign in, you'll answer an NDA. Hopefully you'll say yes. I think otherwise it kicks you out. And then it starts the exam. There's a little mark button at the top, so you can mark a question that you're not quite sure about, and you can go back and put notes down later on. So it's 60 minutes for the exam, and then there's another 15 minutes or so for comments. You can expect about 35 questions, give or take. There's a larger pool of questions, so no 2 exams are exactly the same. You expect about 35 questions. A passing score is about 700. That does not mean each question is worth 20 points. They're graded differently, but a passing score is a 700. And again, you can read the rest of that and pause the video if you have to before you read it. Okay, this exam is broken into 4 groups or 4 sections. Describe cloud concepts. When you describe cloud concepts, we're talking about a public cloud, a private cloud, a hybrid cloud. Why should I move to the cloud, or why should my customer move to the cloud? Most of us probably can give the benefits, but I'm going to cover some benefits of moving to the cloud. Obvious benefit is that you don't have an on-premises data center, but we'll talk about some of those benefits. This part of the exam, you notice, is only worth 10 to 15% of the full exam. So if you are comfortable with benefits of moving to the cloud and types of cloud, again, whether it's a public cloud, a private, or a hybrid scenario, then spend more of your study time on Section 2 and Section 3. Section 2 is describing the concepts and services, the capabilities, deployment options for Windows, for Office, for analytics, collaboration tools, management tools. So Section 2 is 30 to 35%. So again, it's weighted more than that first section. And Section 3 explaining security concepts, so security, compliance, privacy, trust, all comes into play here. And again, that's also 30 to 35%. And finally, we talk about pricing and support options within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So when you take a look at the exam, and when you sit down for the exam, you're not going to see Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. The questions are going to be all mixed up within those 35 questions. This is just something that you can expect to see. So now we've gone through what the exam is like. And now we'll start breaking down each of those sections. So Section 1, describe cloud concepts. This describes the different types of clouds available, and we talked about that in the intro a little bit, so public, private, hybrid clouds, but also the benefits of moving to the cloud. And one of the obvious benefits when we talk about the cloud, not benefits, one of the obvious terms that should come to mind is software as a service, or SaaS, SaaS. A software as a service app, or a SaaS, allows you to connect to and use a cloud-based application over the internet. And one that we use every day is Office 365. We use Teams every day, and some of you may be using Salesforce or other SaaS applications. So a SaaS application is that complete software solution that you can purchase as a customer. You can purchase it as a pay-as-you-go. You can do it as a subscription service from a cloud service provider like Microsoft. SaaS apps include like hosted applications and development tools, business analytics tools, database management tools, operating systems, and I'll show you that in a demo coming up, servers and storage and networking, firewalls. So all these are part of your SaaS application. SaaS applications themselves can be broken into two categories. There's the platform as a service. That would be like a Windows 10 or a Server 2019 virtual machine, or it can be infrastructure as a service, which might be a DNS server or a DHCP server hosted in Azure. So in this section, we're going to talk about these, and we're also going to talk about where Azure and Dynamics, where they fit into these solutions. So I keep talking about Azure, but to be specific, this exam is a Microsoft 365 fundamentals exam. It's not an Azure fundamentals exam. So it's not Azure specific. It's specific to Microsoft 365. But to fully understand Microsoft 365, you do have to have some understanding of Azure as well. So to fully understand the cloud concepts, you do have to understand the difference between that SaaS app, between SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS. Again, that's software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. Software as a service includes the apps, again, that we use every day. It might be Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for business. It might be Teams. Platform as a service, or PaaS, includes operating systems. It's the Windows servers hosted in Azure, the Windows 10 and the Linux VMs hosted in Azure. It even might be development tools and database management systems. Those are part of platform as a service. And then infrastructure as a service is a small piece of that larger PaaS picture because it includes things like storage and web app hosting and firewalls, and like I said before, DNS and DHCP service. Now, in Azure, and Mark Grimes has some great exam prep sessions on Azure as well, because there are a lot of Azure exams. And to fully understand Azure, you would be taking some of those fundamentals and administrator associate exams as well. But there are over 200 products and services within Azure, all designed for different reasons, to bring different solutions to life. And these cloud services help solve today's challenges and challenges of the future. They build and manage applications across the multiple clouds, including on premises and including on the edge, and include tools and frameworks of your choice. And that's what's so great about it is Microsoft 365 and Azure. It's customizable. It's whatever tools, frameworks you want to use, and it's continuous innovations between Microsoft and our partners, and we'll keep supporting development in the future. And some of those tools include Dynamics 365. And Dynamics allows you to really manage your entire business, from running analytics and HR and marketing, all comes from Dynamics. And Dynamics 365, making it the SaaS Dynamics, not the on-premises Dynamics. And some of the tools allow you to move more of your infrastructure into the cloud. So let me actually show you that Azure portal for those of you that haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to start here in my portal.azure.com, and you can see I'm logged in as a global admin. You can't see I'm logged in as a global admin. Take my word for it, I'm logged in as a global admin. And first thing you want to see, if you haven't seen the Azure portal before, some of us haven't, I want to show you just a little tour of it. And first you can see, start with an Azure free trial. I actually don't have an Azure subscription in my demo tenant, but I can show you a lot of this stuff. So I can start with that Azure free trial. I can log into Azure Active Directory, and I can access my student benefits. Underneath, I have my Azure services, so I can create a resource, and I have all of these to the right that I can create, plus some more. But for example, I can create a virtual machine, and that might be an IaaS virtual machine, infrastructure as a service, meaning that virtual machine's running something like DHCP or DNS. It's part of my infrastructure. Or that virtual machine might be running Windows 10 or Server 2019 or even a Linux VM, which makes it a platform as a service or a PaaS virtual machine. I have my storage accounts here, and storage accounts, there are a couple different types of storage accounts. And luckily, if you've never used storage accounts before, there's actually some training, quick videos and interactive guides that you can do right from here. But basically, the storage account contains all of the Azure storage or all of the Azure data storage objects, things like blobs and files and queues and tables, and it's massively scalable. And there's a few different types of storage accounts. So I would implore you to look at Mark Grimes's Azure exam prep resources, because he gets into all of this, all of these services, again, the VMs, the storage accounts, the SQL databases, and even other resources. I can navigate down to my subscriptions. That's what I'm going to show you right here. So under subscriptions, you can see I have 0 subscriptions right now. But if I went to add one, the first thing it wants me to add, as that's working, is it wants me to add either a free trial or pay-as-you-go, or of course in Azure for Students. But a free trial gives me 200 minutes or so, I'm sorry, $200 worth of Azure credit. I can do a pay-as-you-go, or I can look at some of these other offers that I may or may not be eligible for based on my subscription level later on. So I might do a developer support, check availability or check eligibility for developer support. If I want to do an Azure that's not part of my prod environment, then I can select that offer again, or I could select one of these. So as we start looking into Azure, I want you to go to portal.azure.com and start looking at these services, look at the tools, look at these useful links or technical documentation. And again, if you have any questions about Intune, and then you start looking at these resources, like go to the overview, go to the getting started. If you want to know about, again, if you want to know about virtual machines, look at some of the training available, because it's going to help you with this exam. All right, so finally, we'll talk about some of those cloud concepts. And I've mentioned a couple of times the different types of clouds: public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. Which one's the best to use? Why would I use one over the other? And they all have their advantages. So let's talk about that. So the difference between them: a public cloud is the most common cloud. People think of Microsoft Azure, it's owned by Microsoft, it must be a private cloud, or they look at OneDrive and it must be a private cloud, but that's not the case. The most common type of cloud is a public cloud, and that's hosting cloud resources like servers, like storage, and it's operated by a third party, and that third party is Microsoft. It's one of the other parties that host cloud solutions. So Azure is a public cloud. Now in that public cloud, we have tenants, and each customer gets their own tenant, and they might have their own Office 365, their own OneDrive for Business, but it's hosted on the larger public cloud. Azure itself is a public cloud. So again, your tenant might be hosted in the same actual physical hardware as someone else's tenant, but you only have access to yours, they only have access to theirs. Advantages of the public cloud: it's low cost, no maintenance, unlimited scalability. You can scale it as much as you need to, and it's high reliability, 99.99999 something percent reliable. Then there's the private cloud. A private cloud hosts resources used exclusively by one business or one organization, one school, one government. The private cloud might be physically located in the company's data center, or it could be hosted in another data center, but it's physically hosted for that customer. Often, again, it's used by financial services and government and other industries that have these mission critical or business critical operations, and they're just seeking more control. Advantages: more flexibility because you own the hardware, and more control because you own that cloud. And then there's the hybrid cloud. The hybrid cloud combines the private and the public cloud, allowing apps and resources to move between the two environments. The advantage is control, that you maintain the on-premises so you can still control those, that private infrastructure for sensitive assets, while some of the other assets like your email or like your SharePoint sites or like your OneDrive for Business can be hosted in the public Azure cloud. And they're there whenever you need them. So the ease of transitioning workloads over time, it's nice and easy if you want to go to a fully public cloud, or you can stay in that hybrid scenario. So on the exam, you want to identify scenarios where a cloud-based solution is more beneficial than an on-premises solution, or a scenario where, again, there might be that hybrid solution. So make sure you're paying attention and you're reading and understanding the question, because each one does have a benefit or have its benefits, more than one benefit. So make sure you understand what the question is actually asking you, and be able to compare the cost of on-premises solutions to cloud-based. And more often than not, the cloud-based is more efficient and it can be cheaper in the long term because you're not renting servers, you're not buying servers, you pay as you go, but also there's lower emissions and power costs in that public cloud. So look at some of those factors as well. Okay, we're going to do a practice question here. Your customer is considering moving from its on-premises infrastructure to a Microsoft subscription service. The company plans to start with migrating Exchange and SharePoint on-premises service to Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. You need to identify 2 things to consider to help them with their decision. So this exam, if you've taken other Microsoft exams, and raise your hand if you've taken other Microsoft exams. If you've taken other Microsoft exams, you know there are a lot of them might be like, what's the first step in migrating mailboxes to Exchange Online? But this exam's a fundamentals exam. There'll be some technical things, but nothing really nothing like that type of level 300, level 400 technical. Right now, we're just looking at what are 2 considerations what are 2 things to consider when you decide to move to the cloud. Answer, what are 2 considerations? Each answer is a complete solution. Choose 2. Predictable Exchange Server Client Access Licenses, increased availability of resources and scaling. Predictable SharePoint Server Client Access Licenses, decreased infrastructure maintenance costs, decreased availability of services. For those of you that have not taken an exam before, this is an example of a multiple choice with 2 answers. You'll notice there's a square instead of a circle. That means you can choose all that apply. In this case, we're looking at increased availability of resources and scaling and decreased infrastructure maintenance costs. Why not the predictable CALs? Because the predictable CAL is not a pay-as-you-go. It's not a subscription service. It's we need to have 50,000 client access licenses for Exchange because we have 50,000 mailboxes hosted on site. In a cloud Exchange Online, we're not talking about that kind of predictability. We're saying you're going to use as many licenses as you need, and you're going to scale up and scale down over time. So increased availability and scalability and decreased maintenance costs. In this section, we looked at the different types of clouds. We looked at the benefits and advantages of the clouds and some things to consider. And we even had a practice question so you could see what some of those questions look like. And thanks for staying with me for section 2. As we discussed earlier, this is 30 to 35% of the entire exam. So make sure that when you're looking at your study time, the first section was like 15%, this is 30 to 35%. Make sure you understand the core capabilities of Microsoft 365. You understand the options for deploying and managing Windows and Office, what we call Windows as a service or Office as a service. You know the different analytics capabilities of Microsoft 365, from My Analytics, Workplace Analytics, Endpoint Analytics, Desktop Analytics, so many analytics solutions. So know which is the right solution for your customer, because even though they look the same, Desktop Analytics, Endpoint Analytics, they're not the same. And even though Workplace Analytics and My Analytics might sound the same, they're not the same. So make sure you understand the different analytics solutions. And finally, some of the the Microsoft 365 collaborative solutions. So the core services in Microsoft 365 really revolve around things like productivity, teamwork, business management, security, compliance, trust, privacy, and in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And in this exam, you don't need to know whether security and privacy fall into productivity and teamwork, security and compliance. You don't need to know which products fall into which categories that you see here. You just need to know that these are really the 4 main concepts of the core Microsoft 365 capabilities. So we have productivity and teamwork, and we have business management and voice and meetings, security and compliance, and again, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. SharePoint Online for efficient collaboration and communications, and same with Microsoft Teams because it uses SharePoint online in the background, in the back end, to keep all of your teams in sync. And it also uses OneDrive for Business in the back end. If I share a file, me to you, individually to you, it's going to use OneDrive for Business as that sharing. But if I share it with a team, it's going to use SharePoint. So the collaborative solutions, SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive, and of course Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is near and dear to me because it's Microsoft Intune, a configuration manager for managing all devices. And again, this isn't a Windows-specific exam, it's a Microsoft 365 exam. So all devices means your Android, it means your iOS, your iPad, your Mac, and of course your Windows 10 device. So Windows 10, we'll talk about that as well. Windows 10 Enterprise and Windows 10 Professional, Windows 10 EDU SKU, all can be managed with Microsoft 365. And it depends on which SKU you have, which licensing SKU. Do you have a education SKU, an A1 and A3? Do you have a first line worker SKU, an F1 or an F3? Do you have a Windows SKU? A Windows E3, a Windows E5, an Office E3, Office E5, all comes together as part of Microsoft 365. And of course, there is Office 365 Pro Plus, which on this exam has been updated so we know it as Microsoft 365 Apps for Enterprise, Microsoft 365 Apps. And of course, at the top of all this, we always say privacy is most important, but also just as important is accessibility. Making sure all of our services are designed with inclusivity in mind and really at the forefront, not as an afterthought. So you look at something like PowerPoint and you can turn on closed captions in PowerPoint. And of course, we have many languages of closed captions available in Office and in Teams as well. So they all come with security and compliance and accessibility as the forefront, not as an afterthought. And some of them might require an E3 level. Some of them might require an E5 level. Not the accessibility, that should be available. But when we think about the security and the trust, know what's available at each of the E3 versus E5 versus F1 versus F3. So again, when we look at some of the main features of Microsoft 365, the main feature or the reason to go to Microsoft 365 is it's cloud-based. It's always up to date. It's a cloud service. And some of this, like Intune and like Dynamics and Azure, they get updated automatically several times per year with new features, with new capabilities, and they get updated on different schedules. So one tenant may get updated before the other one, and we start gathering some of those insights and some of that analytics to make sure that these features are working as expected. Office, Windows may have to be updated manually, or they can be updated from the cloud service. And when we talk about updating Windows, we're talking about something that we call Windows as a Service. You might see it as WAAS, you might call it WAS, Windows as a Service. And Windows as a Service, Windows 10 has semi-annual release cadence, and that means we're releasing twice a year. So you might have seen version 1903, version 1909, version 2004, version 20H2. We're releasing twice a year, roughly every 6 months between them. And we also have what's called a long-term servicing channel. The long-term servicing channel requires Windows 10 Enterprise. That's something to know for the exam. And instead of having a cadence where it's going to be updated periodically, again, every 6 months, or however your customer or the situation in the exam wants it, but we do release every 6 months and you can upgrade every 6 months. LTSC is designed for those machines that can't upgrade every 6 months, and they might be running an ATM, they might be running warehouse equipment, and they might be running an operating room piece of equipment. In other words, they're not actually meant for productivity, and so you wouldn't typically see something like Office installed on an LTSC, long-term servicing channel release of Windows 10. And they have a 10-year life cycle. The other versions, those semi-annual channel, the life cycle length depends on the type of Windows or the versioning of Windows. So when we take a look at Windows 10 Pro SKU, that is an 18-month servicing life cycle. That means that version 1903 will go end of service 18 months after it was released. But version 1909 will also go end of service 18 months after it was released. When you're looking at Windows 10 Enterprise or Windows 10 for Education, EDU, those have the 18-month cadence for the early release. That's the 1903, 20H4, before that the 1803. So what we call in the northern hemisphere, we call the spring release, or the first half of the year, the H1 release, that has an 18-month life cycle. But the second half, that 1909, the 20H2, before that the 1809, those have a 30-month life cycle. So when you're only for enterprise and for EDU. So when you're talking to your customers, we really want them to upgrade every 6 months, but if they're going to do once a year or even once every 2 years, they're going to have to be on that second half cycle to do that, because that's where they get the 30-month support or 30 months of servicing. Now, we talked about LTSC requiring Windows 10 E3, but something else does as well, and that's Windows Virtual Desktop. Windows Virtual Desktop is a Windows 10 E3 virtual machine hosted in Azure. So again, that would be a virtual machine in Azure as a platform as a service. Windows WVD is a Windows 10 multi-user hosted in Azure. So multi-user meaning typically when we have like a help desk that's all using virtual machines, that's hosted on a server. And the server is multi-user and it's streaming down a virtual machine or a virtual experience to the user. But this is a Windows 10 that's a multi-user, and only WVD has that capability. And WVD can only be hosted in Azure. So WVD also requires a Windows E3 or a Microsoft 365 E3 license. And you also, the benefit for an account team would be that not only are you selling the E3, but you're also selling Azure consumption as well. And that's the other part of WVD, is that it does consume Azure minutes or Azure credits as well. Now, we've talked about Windows as a service, and again, there's also Office as a service. That's Microsoft 365 apps. And when you install Microsoft 365 apps, you might install that into a monthly channel or a semi-annual channel, multiple channels available for Office 365 or Microsoft 365 apps. Of course, like there's a Windows LTSC, there's also an Office perpetual Office, and that's Office 2013, Office 2016, Office 2019, where they don't get upgraded every month or every 6 months. Again, they have static set of features. And not only do they have a static set of features, but you also lose things like real-time collaboration. So your customers that are using that perpetual Office because they don't want to take updates every 6 months or every month, they also lose the ability for an employee to install it on up to 5 of their corporate devices, or they lose the ability to do that real-time collaboration. I'm going to go ahead and read one practice question for right now. We're not at the end of the section yet. I just threw this question in the middle. You are the IT administrator for Contoso. Contoso has Microsoft 365 subscription and a Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant with 2,500 users. Your manager registers for a Power BI account to view the number of employees that are using Microsoft 365 services each month. Part of this section is actually about reporting, and I'm not going to cover reporting, but you should know that in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, there is reporting, and you can do Power BI reporting as well. This question is going to get to that caveat. So when your manager registers for a Power BI account to view the number of employees that are using Microsoft 365 services each month, when she signs into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, no Microsoft 365 reports are displayed. What do you need to do? Oh, you need to ensure that when your manager signs into Microsoft 365 Admin Center, she can run these reports. What should you do? Add your manager as an application administrator in Azure Active Directory. Add your manager as a user administrator in Azure Active Directory. Log into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and enable usage analytics for Power BI. Log into the Azure Portal and add an application insights resources. So you should also know that within Azure Active Directory, there are different what we call RBAC or role-based access controls, allowing some people to see parts of Active Directory and parts of Office and parts of Microsoft 365 where other admins can't. So when you look at that, both options A and B, both could be correct. Either one of them could be correct. You also know that Power BI, there's a usage requirement to use Power BI. And in the Azure Portal, again, you can also add an insights resource. We talked about that in the first section, all the different resources that you can add into Azure. So in this case, the answer is that you need to make that manager you need to log into Microsoft 365 Admin Center and enable the usage analytics for Power BI. And let me go ahead and show you how to configure Windows as a service and Office as a service. Yeah, so I'm going to show you a couple of things here, and they're both going to start from my endpoint.microsoft.com Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So first I want to show you Windows as a service. I'm going to start that by going to Devices, and then you'll see that my Windows 10 update rings and my Windows 10 feature updates. For right now, because we're talking about Windows as a service, I am going to show you both of those, but I'm going to start with the Windows 10 feature updates because frankly, it's a lot easier and quicker to show you. So I'm going to the Windows 10 feature updates, create profile, and I don't even have to give it a name. You'll notice my settings and then goes right to assignments. And what we can do here with Windows 10 feature updates is I can say I want to make sure that all these devices get upgraded to Windows 10 version 20H2 or Windows 10 version 2004, depending on what my needs are. So, and there's really no more settings to apply. I simply say 20H2 and next, and I assign that to my group of users. Notice I can have multiple profiles, so I can have some of them are going to 20H2 today, and then I can, a few days later or a couple of months later, I can add another profile to another group, another assignment, and review and create and next. The other thing I can do instead, I'm going to go ahead and discard that, is I can go to update rings. Update rings really is where Windows as a service shines, and that's because Windows as a service, when I come to create my profile, and for this profile, I'm just going to go ahead and say Windows 10, we'll just say pilot ring fast. And I'm not doing a Windows Insider preview. I'm going to explain all of those things in just a moment. So next, and from right here, I can choose to do a Windows Insider preview fast or Windows Insider preview slow. Instead, I'm going to say semi-annual channel. So I want 20H2 when 20H2 is available, not before. But I do want it when it's available. So I'll allow product updates and driver updates, and eventually firmware updates will be here as well. And feature update deferral period. So I'm going to leave that at 0. And what that means is the day Windows 10 version 20H2 is available, and it's available today, but the day Windows 10 version 20H2 is available, I want that to be deployed to my assignment. So whichever groups I put in the assignment. And then I'll create another profile that says maybe 4. 4 days later, I want it to go to, and then I assign it to that group. And again, 30 days later, I create another profile for that group. So these deferrals say how long after an OS is available will it start to deploy to whomever you assigned it to. Again, I'm going to put that back to 0. I'll explain that uninstall period in just a moment. So the user experience, when will we restart the device? During office hours, after office hours. Windows 10, starting with Windows 10 version 1809, actually has a built-in AI, I'm sorry, 1909, has a built-in AI that can deal with that. I was right the first time, it's 1809. So we can leave this at the defaults and let the Windows 10 version, again, 1809 or later, can actually use the AI to say, you know what, he's actually working typically till 7:30. So even if that says 8 to 5, at 7:30, if Windows 10 thinks you're busy, it's still not going to restart your machine. And I'll allow restart checks, and I'll allow the option within settings on the Windows 10 device to pause Windows updates. All right, what does that uninstall period mean? And when Windows 10 was first released, way back in 2015, there was a 30-day uninstall period or rollback period, which means as you upgrade to the next version of Windows, you have 30 days to uninstall that and go back to the previous version. Some of our customers told us 30 days is too long. You're taking up 25 gigs of hard drive on all of my client machines. So in one of the later versions, I believe it was 1703, it's really unimportant, we changed it to 10 days. And then some of our customers say, yeah, but 10 days isn't long enough. They don't have a chance to run all their critical applications in 10 days. So now we have the default of 10 days, but you can make that uninstall period anywhere from 2 to 60 days on your need. So this is very customizable. Let the company decide if 2 days or if 60 days is necessary to keep the uninstall files or that windows.old folder. And then again, I would go next, assign it to specific groups of users, and create. So that's how Windows 10 Windows as a service works. Office as a service, I can also do right from my endpoint.microsoft.com console. I can do it from the Office 365 Admin Center, but I'm going to do it right from here because I'm already here. And instead, I'm going to go to Apps, and I want to install a Windows app. And when I click Add, it's going to say what kind of app do you want to install, and it's going to be a Microsoft 365 app, which is what we renamed Office 365 Pro Plus. So I'll say it's for Windows 10. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire config.office.com wizard, which is here, and we're not in config.office.com, but it is the same wizard. Instead, I'm going to leave these defaults to get to the one dropdown that I want to get to, and that's the update channel. So just like Windows has those update channels, remember it said semi-annual channel, or it said Windows Insider Fast, Windows Insider Slow. We have an update channel for Office as well, and we can assign, so you see the assignments, we can assign this update channel as a current channel, which is monthly. Well, current channel is monthly. Current channel preview is a little bit quicker than monthly. Monthly enterprise channel, semi-annual channel preview, semi-annual channel. So we also have the Office as a service. When do I want Office to update to the next version of Office as that's available? And again, just like I didn't with my Windows, I'm not going to finish that, but I want to show you where Windows as a service is configured within endpoint.microsoft.com and where Office as a service is configured. All right, we have another practice question. Describe, you are the IT administrator for Contoso. Contoso uses Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, and recently tenant attached the Configuration Manager environment to Microsoft Intune. All workloads have been moved to Intune. You want to create a policy to deploy Windows updates based on channels developed in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. You must create a Windows update strategy that will update Windows 10 devices from the cloud service while maintaining control of when the updates are offered. Which tools should you use? Configuration Manager, Windows Update for Business, or Windows Server Update Services, WSUS? I think some of you have already figured this one out, and you're going to be using Windows Update for Business for this one, right? Okay, this last section I'm going to talk about is one more slide. Describe the core Microsoft 365 services and concepts, and specifically the analytics offerings. Workplace analytics, cloud-based solution provides insights about how your users are spending their time. Of course, it doesn't say Joe is spending his time doing this and Alfred is spending his time doing this. It's privacy is at the forefront. But leaders can get insights about how their people are getting their work done, and even get data analytics and data analysis to see how patterns are changing over time. And this past 12 months or so, we've seen a lot of patterns change because we went from being an on-premises workforce, and that's globally, not just at Microsoft, to being a remote workforce and using more tools like Teams and using Office 365 more than hallway conversations. So you can get that data analysis on how patterns are changing over time. Then there's My Analytics. My Analytics is more for me, and I can see that in Outlook where it says, so, schedule this focus time so you can get more work done. Or even, it looks like you're going to send an email, but the person responding, or the person you're sending it to, may not even see it till 8:30 this morning. So why don't you wait till 8:30 to see it? So it allows you to create a focus plan and gives you inline suggestions in Outlook. And I mentioned other analytics solutions like endpoint analytics and desktop analytics. And even though these don't have to do specifically like My Analytics, there's still analytics solutions that require some Microsoft 365 pieces. Desktop analytics requires Configuration Manager, so Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Endpoint analytics is part of the Greater Productivity Score, which is also part of Microsoft 365 and Office 365 admin centers. So look at all the different analytics solutions and all the different analytics solutions when you're studying up for this exam. So in this exam, again, this section 2 is worth 30 to 35% of the full exam. So make sure you understand the core capabilities, make sure you understand how Office and Windows update with the cloud services, Windows Update for Business, the different cadences from semi-annual channel, or in Office's even monthly channels. And make sure you can describe some of those collaborative services like Yammer and Teams. And when should I use Yammer versus when should I use Teams? And when should I use Microsoft 365 Groups, which is the new name of Office 365 Groups? When should I use, again, SharePoint Online and a lot of those collaborative solutions that are all part of Microsoft 365. Hey, so again, this section, section 3, is worth about 35% of the entire exam. So make sure you understand security, compliance, privacy, trust. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and cover like zero trust strategies and unified endpoint management, and even the services trust portal. And then there's things in this section of the exam about threat management and identity and access management. Threat management gets into the whole suite of Defender products that's available with Microsoft 365, including Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which is the new name of Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection, and Microsoft Defender for Microsoft 365 Apps, which is Microsoft Defender for Office, and Microsoft Defender for Identity, which is Azure Advanced Threat Protection. So make sure you know the full suite of Defender products that are available for threat protection, as well as things like Azure Information Protection and Windows Information Protection, because all of that is fair game in this exam. And there are other exam prep recordings like for MD 101 and MS 101, which actually get into these in a little more detail. But for right now, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and cover a lot of what you see on the slide in front of you. So I'm going to start with Microsoft 365 and the security and compliance. We're going to look at the key components of the zero trust architecture and the key security pillars. And you see things like this white box. And I'm going to break that down, but this is really what we mean when we talk about security in Microsoft 365. So let's look at that. So security policy enforcement. Microsoft's approach to zero trust extends throughout the entire digital estate. It's not just on an endpoint or on a server or in Azure. It's the entire digital estate, and it serves an integrated security philosophy and its end-to-end strategy. And it all starts with identity and multi-factor authentication, which your users will have to they'll need to configure it once you turn it on. But it includes multi-factor authentication and identity, which gives your users access to their devices, which then in turn gives them access to the infrastructure, which then gives them access to apps and resources, and ultimately your IP and your data. So it all starts with identity. And of course, with multi-factor authentication and assigning that user risk. And with our, Microsoft's rapid pace of innovation and the need to stay current, Windows 10 devices and the more security we add to Windows 10 with version after version just bolster this architecture as the most secure ever. And I've mentioned before, this exam is not solely a Windows exam. So the security that we offer in iOS and iPadOS, macOS, Android devices, largely is contingent on those devices and those operating system platforms to provide the security, and then we integrate with that. And if we have something more secure than that they're offering, the more secure is going to win. So we have that architecture here that allows any platform to be the most secure. And then we add the intelligent security improvements with Defender and AppGuard and System Guard and some of the things I just mentioned, and improved identity protections like FIDO2 and Windows Hello for Business, allowing me to use my face or my fingerprint on the biometric front to support that Microsoft, that multi-factor authentication, all while being able to, allowing the user to access what they need and classification labels and making sure those apps, those cloud apps are secure and they're only being accessed by compliant devices, and using those conditional access type of policies, which really, those organizational policies, which really bring that whole security story home. And actually, let me go ahead and show you where we would set some of these. So when we talk about security in Microsoft 365, there's so much that we can show you, and I'm going to start at security.microsoft.com, and I've clicked the more resources, which brings me to the info page and all of these blades, where I can set up something like a CASB or Cloud App Security Broker, and I can talk about Azure Advanced Threat Protection, which is recently renamed to Microsoft Defender for Identity. I can go to the Office 365 Security and Compliance, or I can go to the Device Management or Microsoft Endpoint Manager console, which is actually already open for me right here, and that's endpoint.microsoft.com. So when I go to endpoint.microsoft.com and I click the endpoint security, you'll notice so many options from creating and assigning security baselines, to looking at the security tasks that are available, to configuring antivirus and firewall and disk encryption, which is Microsoft BitLocker options. You'll also see other things like device compliance and conditional access. Device compliance, and this isn't only a Windows exam, so device compliance might be the iPhone can't be jailbroken, the Android can't be rooted, the Android must be running on a Samsung, or must be running this specific version of the operating system. That's where device compliance comes in, and if it's not compliant, then you can assign a conditional access policy to make sure that that non-compliant device can't access cloud resources such as Office 365, email, or Microsoft Teams. Another place where we can go besides for these is the Microsoft Defender ATP, which is recently renamed to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And I don't have and here's a good exam tip, I don't have a Microsoft 365 E5 license on my tenant. So when I click on this, you'll notice unavailable. I don't have it available because I don't have the appropriate licenses. There's nothing I can do here. So make sure that you're reading the exam question to see that you have a Microsoft 365 E5 or at least a Windows E5 license, which is necessary. The next place I want to show you here is the Services Trust Portal. Servicetrust.microsoft.com is a Services Trust Portal or Service Trust Portal. And from here, I can do things like I can open up my Compliance Manager, which gives me my compliance score. I can also create these data classification labels, and I can help my customers create data classification labels. Or again, the way the exam might be worded, you can, the exam question, make sure you're looking for that data classification label because that's part of the Compliance Manager. And you can see here, I can Trainable Classifiers means, hey, anytime it sees any of these words, and I'll let that come up, and that can be an exact data match, or it can be a, whether there's a plural or a singular, doesn't matter. This is actually taking a little bit longer than I had expected, so I'll jump over to sensitive information types. And I can create that info. This should be up as well. Right, so what kind of sensitive information is it? Is it a U.S. Social Security number? Is it an Australia tax file number, or an Austria driver's license number? And let's go back to Trainable Classifiers, which I assume is up by now. And I can create that Trainable Classifier. I have some that are already here, and I can create new ones. And I did actually just close that dialog box that said that I can scan for some new ones. So when we look at Microsoft security, trust, compliance, privacy in Microsoft 365, there are different levels of E3, E5, and different SKUs of the E5, from security E5, compliance E5, Microsoft 365 E5. So make sure you know what's available for your customers. Make sure you know what's available the way the exam itself, the exam question itself has been written. All right, so after we look at those consoles and where we can set the security, you see there's a lot of it there. And this exam really will cover not the specifics on how to set a policy, but it wants to know what policies can be set and what we talk about when we talk about security. And again, that multi-factor and that identity and the devices and all those organizational policies that could be set. Let's go ahead and look at a practice question on that. Your company has an Azure Active Directory P1 tenant and a Microsoft 365 E3 subscription. You are investigating the use of multi-factor authentication, MFA, for accessing Microsoft 365 apps. Your boss asks you to provide a possible impact or cost to implementing MFA. And as I've said before, this exam doesn't want to know how to configure MFA. It wants to know what's the impact after we configure MFA. So you must provide your boss with a possible impact or cost. Which option should you provide to your boss? Users will be forced to configure an additional authentication factor the next time they log in after being enrolled. Users will be required to change their domain passwords the next time they log in after being enrolled. You must upgrade to Microsoft 365 subscription to include an E5 component, or you must upgrade Azure Active Directory tenant to Premium P2. And of course, the answer to this one, maybe not of course, but the answer to this one is one, and I mentioned this earlier, which is why I said of course, Once we configure MFA, the users will then have to configure it on their device. Whether that's a secure PIN, a text or SMS message, or face, however we do it. If we do it on a Windows 10 device, it might be Windows Hello. If it's on an Android or iOS device, again, it might be Microsoft Authenticator app. They'll just need something else to enable that login. All right, so we look at UEM, or Unified Endpoint Management, and always think about these two products. And they're near and dear to me, and I've mentioned this before, but Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager and Microsoft Intune. So these two products equal Microsoft Endpoint Manager. It's not one or the other, it's both. And we want our customers that are using Configuration Manager today to start moving some workloads to the cloud and start, tenants attach that Intune and then start moving those workloads. And that we want you to do that. We want our customers to do that because they'll get the most secure way to manage. And they can continue managing with Configuration Manager. But once they do that tenant attach, they also get conditional access policies. They also get compliance policies. They also get DLP and a lot of remote actions that can be done during that. And let me go ahead. I'm going to show you that white box again. I'm going to expand that out for you. Endpoint Manager, we just talked about that. It's the hub that includes both of those products, Intune and Configuration Manager. And we're meeting at the beginning of 2021, and we know that the last 10 months, it was hard for a lot of our customers to start sending updates and apps and resources and help desk requests over to their remote workforce. They weren't prepared for that. And our customers, even before this happened, our customers that were using Intune or that had tenant attached and started that co-management, they were ready. They were already prepared for when this was going to happen. So even before the pandemic sent them home, we supported our workforce this way, and a lot of our customers did too, but the ones that didn't were ill prepared for this. And we're talking about supporting Windows and supporting Office and Edge and hardware provisioning with Windows Autopilot. All comes from Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And for Windows, it's actually agentless. In Windows 10, the MDM stack is built right in. Once you enabled tenant attach and once you have that endpoint manager, you can do things like Windows Update for Business. Windows Update for Business has those cloud controls that allow for driver updates and operating system quality and feature updates and even firmware updates. It can all get sent down to that device. And it can happen from the cloud using Microsoft's content distribution network. Content distribution network, and sending all those updates to the client machine, even though it's coming from the cloud, using your controls. And Windows Update for Business allows you to control when that update makes it down to that client, and with no VPN needed. It's all happening, again, using regular everyday internet, but your controls and your security. And when it comes to provisioning, I talked about Windows Autopilot for hardware provisioning, getting that device sent directly to the end user from the reseller or from the OEM, and having it business ready with your line of business applications automatically, right out of the box. And we move to this next portion, the Security Trust Portal. We've already talked about a little bit of this. I've already showed you in the demo where to access the Security Trust. Again, the Security Trust Portal, but I want to show you a little bit more what it can do and why we're using the Security Trust Portal. And these solutions, they're designed to help your customers assess their current security and what they should do to be more secure and to protect sensitive data and respond to requests with auditing and e-discovery. So here's what it looks like across these three areas: the assess, the protect and govern, and the respond. Microsoft 365 compliance solutions, they're pretty broad, right? They're broad across all of our products and features. So our tools all help you assess and manage compliance from one place with actionable insights. I know it's like a marketing term, but actionable insights and simplification of the compliance process. And using that information protection and governance solutions, you can automatically protect and govern sensitive data and You can efficiently respond to regulatory and litigation, investigation data discovery, things like litigation holds and e-discovery. That's all part of the Microsoft 365 solutions. Microsoft Cloud Services includes several auditing and reporting features that customers can use to track their administrative activity within their tenant, such as if an administrator makes a change to Exchange Online or SharePoint Online, or users make changes to documents and other items that may have been highly confidential or that they brought back down to, yes, I know it's highly confidential, but I'm going to go ahead and share this anyway type of thing. Customers can use that audit information and reports that are available for to effectively manage and retain all the data that's within their tenant. And again, if there's a hold that needs to be on there for some litigation, the administrators can do that as well. All right, so let's take a look at this practice question. Your company has a Microsoft 365 subscription. All users are assigned Microsoft 365 licenses. Users should be able to protect Office 365 documents with Azure Information Protection. You need to configure support for AIP. Your solution should minimize costs in management requirements. What should you do? Install the Rights Management Service client and then enable the default AIP policy. Install the AIP client classic, create a custom AIP policy, configure Azure Active Directory, enable the default AIP policy, configure a custom AIP policy, install Rights Management Services client. This is basically, we could have done this as like 7 different options and choose 2. Instead, they're letting it known that you can, one of these answers is correct and it's going to be a 2-part. And in this case, we're looking at configure Azure Active Directory, enable the AIP client. And you can do all that right from the portal, the Azure portal at portal.azure.com. You go ahead and create a resource in Azure Information Protection resource and create that policy. And the default policy is all that's required for this question. So section 3, again, it's worth about 35% of the entire exam. I know I went through this relatively quickly, about 15 minutes or so, including the demo, maybe 17 minutes, but there's a lot of information here that I didn't get to cover, like all those threat protection pieces. If you get a chance, look at some of the other exam prep sessions for MS-101 and for MD-101, because they also get into those threat protections and they can give you some more guidance other than just what links can give you. So our final section, gets into pricing and support. And I'll be honest, when I tell you that when I first saw the objectives for this exam, before taking the exam, I was surprised that we talk about pricing and licensing on a certification exam, but we do. So let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about support and whatnot, and of course have another demo with Microsoft 365 Admin Center and a couple of test questions or exam questions. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the course, we can't really talk about pricing. But I will talk about the licensing options available to you. And there's a lot of words in this slide. And I'm not going to read all the words to you, but know that you can purchase any number of SKUs, including first line or frontline SKUs. That's the F1 and F3. The enterprise SKUs, E3 and E5, and any variety of E5 options from again, Windows E5 and Microsoft 365 E5 and Security E5, Compliance E5, and then the education SKUs, the A3 and the E5, a variety of A5 options. These, and any company can have a combination of these. They might have some devices that have F3 and some devices that have E3, so they're first line workers or they're frontline workers. And I'm going to say it that way every time because we're going through a name change right now from first line to frontline. Anyway, so their frontline workers might have an F3 while their office staff has an E3 or an E5 even. So any company can have a combination of these. So think about that as you're designing that licensing solution for the customer, or as you're reading the question and deciding what licensing is best for their warehouse staff, for that construction crew that might need the walkie-talkie feature in Teams, so maybe the F3, and again, or if they want that advanced threat protection, so you're looking at Microsoft 365 E5 or at least Windows E5. So and these can all be purchased through like the volume service, the VLSC Volume Licensing Services Center. They can be purchased via the Microsoft 365 Admin Center for those with an enterprise agreement, and via cloud service providers, those CSPs, for those without an enterprise agreement. So keep that in the back of your mind, and also think about that only a global admin, so a Microsoft 365 global admin or even a billing admin can add those Microsoft 365 licenses. And like licensing, there's a lot of different support plans and SLAs, that's this service level agreements, available to choose from. Opening a ticket might be as easy as going to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. From there, you should be able to see if it's a known issue. You'll have to be able to see known issues in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, so you can add to what, so you can see if there's a published resolution, or you can add a ticket right from there. So we'll schedule a time for a technician to return your call. Let me actually show you the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Okay, so now I'm at the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is admin.microsoft.com or admin.microsoft365.com. And what you'll be able to see from here is I can see what users I have in that are licensed for Microsoft 365, or what groups, roles, purchases, billing. And I'm going to go ahead, I've expanded billing already. So I can purchase extra services or licenses. I can see my products, bills, payments. And when I look at my products, so you can see here, I have an EMS E5, I have a Microsoft 365 E5 Compliance, I have an Office 365 E5, and I have a Windows 10 Enterprise E3, but I don't have a Windows 10 Enterprise E5 or a Microsoft 365 E5. That's why my Advanced Threat Protection node was all grayed out, because again, I don't have a Microsoft 365 E5 and I don't have a Windows Enterprise E5. All right, so if I come here and I look at my Office 365 E3 demo trial, hey, it's a good thing I'm doing this today. Office 365 demo trial expires today, so I can actually buy another subscription. I won't, because I am doing this today. So anyway, so I can look at my demo trial. Again, I can come back here and I can look at my E5. I assume this one also expires today. Yes, it does. And I can see how many licenses I have and how many are assigned. And then I can assign them if I have extra ones. If I had only 10 assigned, I could assign these 10. So other things that I can do from within my admin center, besides to look at my bills, my payment methods, I can actually, once I expand support, I can create a new service request. I can view what service requests I've already done. So new service request. And now we have a Clippy assistant that can help with that. How do I install Office as the default? But I might ask, how can I assign licenses? How can I purchase more licenses? So I can look at all these different support options as well from here, as well as look at some of my other reports. My security and compliance report would be specific to this section of the exam, but I do have usage reports as well, so I can see how many of my users are using Microsoft 365. And as well, I can get to some of those other admin centers, which I got to from my security.microsoft.com above, but I can also get to from security, compliance, Endpoint Manager, Azure Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, and whatnot. So you can see that these are the same admin centers, just one nice, easy place to get to them. And listen, and there's so much to say about licensing besides what we just saw. I can't do it all here. So again, you might have to pause this and look at some of these links. Check out the links. They'll show you what's available, whether purchasing through a CSP or through the VLSC or through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and based on the scenarios presented to you in those exam questions. Let's look at our first exam question for this section. So your company has an Azure AD tenant and a Microsoft 365 subscription. Your boss asks you to explain the difference between the release life cycles in a product's the different releases in a product's life cycle. Which release best describes each scenario? Drag the appropriate term to each scenario. We didn't really talk about that in this section, but there are different release life cycle stages for any product. And we used to call it like the alpha, then beta, and then it was generally available. But now really it's a private preview, a public preview, and then generally available. And not every product is going to have a private and a public and a general availability date. Some of them will skip over the private preview and just do public preview. Hey, we have this new product we want you to test out. And some will skip that public and just go from private right to general availability. I'll explain those during this exam right here, during this question. So Microsoft releases a new service that's available for customers to purchase monthly. Microsoft is testing a new service that is available to anyone that is interested, and Microsoft is testing a new service that is available by invitation. So again, in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm one at a time. General availability means it's generally available. It means anyone can get it at any time. It's available for subscription. It's available for purchase. It's available. No invitations needed. Microsoft is testing a new service that is available by invitation. That's a private preview. We talk to some customers and say, hey, we're testing out this new service. We'll call it something, maybe even universal print. Are you interested? Yes, you are. Okay, we're going to send you an invitation. Make sure you reply to it, and then we'll start testing those universal print features with you. Universal print being just an example. So that's a private preview. But then after we get enough feedback from that private preview audience, we might open that up for a public preview. Public preview meaning, yes, it's still in preview and you'll see preview next to it everywhere you see the term. However, anyone can sign up for it without that invitation first. So Microsoft is testing a new service that is available to anyone that is interested. That's a public preview. So in this section, we got into a little bit of pricing. We got into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We looked at SLAs. We looked at support, how to open a support ticket, how to purchase more subscriptions or more licenses. Make sure you know all those different offerings. Make sure you know the different SLAs that are offered to our different customers. Make sure you understand the VLSC versus the CSP. Some other resources for you about the certification itself is you can look at aka.ms role-based cert, and you can look at the new role-based certificates. It's no longer just an MCSE or an MCSA. Now it's actually role-based, so Microsoft 365 Enterprise Administrator as an example. Look at this training and certification pages. Look at the training certification overview. Look at some learning partners in case you need a little extra help or you want to look at some interactive guides or documentation and even online learning. Call to action for you today is sign up for the exam or view the full list of objectives before you sign up for the exam and go through those objectives. We went through them here quickly, but each section is worth 30 to 35% of the entire exam, up to 40%, I believe. So make sure you look at all the objectives and you have an understanding of all of those objectives. Then you can create your Pearson VUE account at vue.com, create that testing account, and then schedule your exam. Thanks for joining us, and good luck.